Okay, this is a video that is the next part after the one that's called Honeymoon Hideaway to Casper, Wyoming. I ended that one when something happened at the house, so that one is what you watch first, and then you watch this, which is Casper, Wyoming, to the end of our trip, which might even include another trip. But I ended it where I went down in the mud in Kansas, in the raw, muddy pond that they were making into a state park. So, anyway, starting there, this will make more sense if you watch the end of the Casper, Wyoming one. So, I went in to my knee in the mud, and thank heavens I didn't take a second step because I would have been in mud up to both knees. But I tried to get out and pulled my foot out, and I had flip-flops on, so there is a flip-flop left in the mud unless they dug it up when they made the swim area from way back when I left it. So instead of getting in the water at the swimming area, which would have been a muddy mess anyways, I went into the showers in the bathhouse they had and turned on the cold water and had a shower, clothes and all. So I think I even left my wet clothes on and they dried pretty instantly when you came out into the heat. And that was the only night that we slept at a hotel and did not sleep in the camper. After leaving Kansas, we still had a long ways to go to get back to Pennsylvania. And we ended up in traffic at St. Louis at 5 o'clock. And I think I talked about St. Louis on another episode, but we were up into the archway. And I'm not sure if we did that on the way out or the way back. It must have been on the way back. Anyway, St. Louis had a licorice company. And I'm not sure if I told this story before, I just had it planned. Had a licorice factory, and we went in there to the outlet and got some most delicious, fresh, soft, tender, delicious licorice that we were going to bring home. And so we bought a ton of it, thinking that would make it way back to Pennsylvania. But it never made its way back to Pennsylvania because we ate it as we were driving along until our trip was over. I don't have much else to say about the rest of that trip, other than it was miles and miles of fun and wonderful to see the western part of the country, which I had seen before twice with my parents, but we saw some new places. And I was doing it with my new husband back that year, which I think was 76 or 77. I need to look up some of these actual dates because I don't have them by memory. The next trip we did was to Australia. When we went to the World's Fair, which I think was 84 in Knoxville, we loved the Australian exhibit and spent a lot of time there, and we wanted to travel to Australia. It's very fascinating with all the different animals they had, the platypus and the wallabies and the kangaroos. But when you think about it, Australia is as big as the continental United States if you lay them on top of the US map. So asking them at the Australian exhibit at the Knoxville World's Fair was a difficult question because where should we go visit? So we didn't really make a plan for the trip until, let's see, this would have been 1970. No, this is the 80s now. 1985. 1985 is when we went to Australia. I guess sometime that year or earlier, 83 maybe, My dad said to me that Shriners Group is taking a trip to Australia. Do you think you'd want to go? Would you and Robert want to go? Well, of course, it was very expensive, and we were both working at the time. I think I was working for the state, or maybe I'd already quit that and may have been doing Herbalife at the time. Robert was still working at York Graphic Services. He worked there until 2000. So, anyways, we managed to save the money, and yes, we were going to Australia. So, it turns out that trip was November. That year of '85, we did our annual trip to Long Beach Island, where we stayed in that crazy one-story cottage where Roseanne and Pete and Rich slept on the front. And to get to the bathroom, you had to walk through the bedroom where we slept. And the ceiling in the living room was black. I have lots of pictures of LBI. I need to do a whole video and get some photos of LBI and all the times we went there. That was our Labor Day trip. But also, for your information, that happened to be the time that Adam was conceived at LBI. So our next thing was to talk to my dad about going to Australia. So we decided to go to Australia in November, and it turns out at that point in time, I'm like 6 or 9 weeks pregnant. So I did ask if it was okay if we went on the trip and the long flight, and they said at the birth center, yes, that was okay. It was early enough in the pregnancy. So, anyways, we packed up our stuff, and we were not big travelers at that point in time. We had done the road trips and the trips to LBI. Still a lot of work to pack, and when you're going that far and that long, you didn't really know what to pack. But we met up and flew from Harrisburg to somewhere. Not sure if we stopped in Chicago. We did stop on the West Coast. I don't think we changed planes. Boy, this is hard to remember that. Got refueled up, and then we flew to Hawaii first. So our first night of the trip was in Hawaii, which Robert and I had been there before when we went with Rhonda and Dave. I'll have to look up the date of that trip. We did a lot of traveling, and that was before we had our family, so we had 11 years of traveling. So I think I skipped ahead too far to our Australia trip. But anyways, we flew to Hawaii, and we actually did a little touring with the man, I think his name was Charlie, that was my dad's roommate. And then Robert and I, the four of us, did a little traveling and looking around. And then the next day, we got back on the plane and flew to Australia. That was very interesting because they said now we're approaching Australia. We're going to be landing. Let's see, we were landing in Sydney, I guess. Trying to think of the other coast city. And I don't have a whole lot of memories of this trip as far as chronological anything. Mostly I have spotty memories. So I'll have to share those with you. But there's an announcement that we're approaching, and because of Australia being an island nation, that they were going to come and spray the plane before we got off for who knows what. But it was okay. They were going to spray it. It was approved by the World Health Organization. I guess it's to stop contamination from sickness or bugs or who knows what they were thinking. And I went ballistic because I'm having a natural childbirth. I'm using a birth center. I don't take pharmaceuticals. I don't take drugs. I'm a purist. I still try to be a purist most of my life, which I was. And I told the stewardess, I said, I have to be off the plane. You can't spray this stuff on me. I'm pregnant. So eventually, through a lot of stuff, they hurried me off the plane as soon as they landed and before the spray came through, although I saw them coming through where they put both arms up with these spray bottles and walked down through the aisle. But I missed the actual spraying, but who knows how much of that I may have caught. And I ended up being somewhere where I needed to go through customs, and eventually I met up with Robert. And then the other people were talking about whatever happened to that hysterical pregnant lady that was on our flight. So that's how my dad found out that I was pregnant, because we hadn't told him. We were going to tell him when we were home from the trip that he was going to be a grandpa again. So sorry for that long pause. I'm catching my thoughts here. So we disembarked from the plane, left the airport, got on the bus, and went to our hotel. That was my experience of landing in Australia. We're up to 15 minutes now. My voice is out, so I'm going to have to stop. The next in the order of chronological will be our trip in Australia, from Australia to New Zealand to Fiji and home. That'd be part 2, actually part 3 of our travel series.